being a child of residential school, the more they try to silence us,
makes us stronger.
there you go.
Siksapia'ki means the dark lady, so that's the darkness of fighting against oppression. In the late 1800s to 1996, almost 150,000 kids were taken away from their home. How can we not talk about that?
I'm an activist. There's only things that I will speak about, and the reason why I speak about it is lived experience. And so that's the legacy I want to leave, is that I'm a proud Siksika. I'm proud of Treaty 7, and you know, anything that I do, I always keep in the back of my mind, is this something that my son will be very proud of?
Hello everyone, and welcome to our new episode of the Legacy Podcast, brought to you by MCG Career College. I'm your host, Raisa Frida, and today's episode holds a very special significance as we mark Truth and Reconciliation Day. Our guest is someone whose work and lived experience truly embody the spirit of healing, understanding, and building stronger communities. Joining us, Siksapia'ki, also known as Bren Little Light, a senior consultant dedicated to assisting Indigenous communities in applying for the Residential Schools Community Funding Grant. Bren's work includes community-based healing practices, ceremonies, and memorialization projects guided by the Indigenous protocols and permissions. She's also an Indigenous relations expert, bridging understanding between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, promoting reconciliation and helping remove barriers to meaningful inclusion and representation. On top of her professional expertise, Bren's personal story is very powerful. As the daughter of residential school survivors and a 60s scoop survivor herself, she brings both professional knowledge and lived experience to her work. And Bren, today, we are very honored to have you here. Thank you so much for coming here today and blessing us with your presence. Now, before we start, I just want to ask you about your personal journey. Can you share a bit about your personal journey and what inspired you and made you so dedicated to work in a way that you want to support your Indigenous community and be a powerful voice for them?
Sure. So as you included before, I'm a 60 scoop survivor. And so I was taken off the reserve when I was about 9 years old, but I was put into the system when I was 2 years old. And so when I was adopted at 9 years old, I was taken 1,700 miles away from my family, from my community, and I was adopted by a non-Indigenous family. They were quite indoctrinated into the religion, Christian life. And so they would not let me go to powwows, let me go to Stampede, let me understand in my culture, my traditions. And so when I finally was able to go on my own and go to university and go to college, I reached out to Siksika Nation, and that's when I started to find out about my culture. And so I don't want anyone else to go through that. I know there's so many children that are now adults that are now reconnecting. Mm-hmm. And so with Siksika, when I came back home, it was so emotional. I finally found my roots because there was a lot of times where I didn't have that peace. And one thing when I went back to Siksika was I started my healing journey. And so I was able to step away from what I grew up with my adoptive parents and now understand my traditions and my culture. And it was home. Just the peace in my heart was just, and that's why I do a lot for the communities now, because I do have a voice. Since I was a little child, I was that little child that you always had to keep an eye on, who always spoke their mind. And so I want to be the voice for a lot of people that don't have that access. And as someone once said, I can walk into a room and know everybody by the end of the event. So that's the main reason why I'm doing what I do.
That is amazing. And we are, again, very, very lucky to have you here today. You know, it is part of us also learning about the history of Canada. When I was doing some preparation for this podcast, I read a lot about the residential schools, about how so many Canadians do not know about it. And think about the people who are maybe newcomers, you know, how would they understand their relationship, or how they can also play a positive role in building the bridge between the people of this land who were here first before all of us came here. Now that leads to my next question. That is, many Canadians are still learning about the impacts of residential schools and the 60s scoop. From your perspective, what do you wish people understood more about this history?
I think for myself, I mean, we do have the National Indigenous Day, and then tomorrow we have the Truth and Reconciliation Day. We need more info, and especially cultural training for colleges, industry. Anytime you're working with the First Nations, and even when you're not working with the First Nations, have that cultural training. There's actually, through the University of Alberta, there's an online free program.
Yes,
and
I know of that.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
Amazing.
And so I always tell industry, go take that course. It's free. For myself, personally, I've always told people, residential school ripped my family apart, because my dad went to residential school, my mother went to residential school, my oldest brother, late oldest brother, went to residential school and day school. My second brother, he's day school 60 scoop. My sister is day school, and I'm 60 scoop. So it just, our family was just torn apart. And tomorrow will mark the 5th year that we've lost my late oldest brother, and I found it really ironic that he passed away on September 30th. And that was the first year that they acknowledged it. And I often wondered what our life would have been if our parents didn't go to residential school. So, yeah. And regarding the 60s scoop, not too many people know about the 60s scoop. They know a lot about the residential school. But with the 60s scoop, there's not much knowledge. I know a couple of years ago, I was part of it. Rachel Notley did an apology to us, and I counted when she did her apology, she said sorry 13 times. And the one thing that really got to me, I was sitting in the legislative building, and I was sitting there with all the chiefs, and I knew it was going to be an emotional day. And she actually, before she did this apology, they did these kind of roundtable discussions or sharing circles throughout the different cities, and sat down with the 60 Scoop survivors, and got to know their story. And in her apology, I said something in that. In those sharing circles, she used that part of her speech. And that's when I crumpled. I was like, oh my goodness. And I was very lucky that I had the chiefs around me, that they took out their eagle fan and they fanned me 4 times just to give me strength. So yeah, really, there's a really good program. I think it's on Prime. Is it on Prime or Crave? It's called Little Bird. Don't watch it by yourself. It's very emotional, and it will really explain the 60 Scoop to you. So.
Thank you so much for giving us those, small resources to just look at. Sometimes I feel like our history here in Canadian history, I'm just talking about from my point of view, and it doesn't include anyone else in the college or my organization, just from a person, Raisa. When I came to Canada, I had no clue that there was Indigenous people in this land. I thought that this land is full of Caucasian people, and they have been living here for thousands of years, and now I'm in a country like that. I was 23 years old I was a newscaster back home. I went to university, so I was quite educated. It's not like, I came here as a baby and did not read a book. I come from Bangladesh, and we also got colonized by the British. And there was a long time then. It took us a lot of bloodshed and a lot of famine and so many things before we were free, right? And when I read the books in my country, I remember reading about First Nation people, only one sentence in the social science book. It says, the First Nation people live in teepees and they live in jungles and they're called Red Indians. So when I came here and I first met a First Nation person, I said, oh my God, Dad, that's a Red Indian. Just think about the term itself. It's so derogative. And I felt so bad that I did not know so much, not only about the country I'm going to, but also my own history. Then I realized that just like Canadian history, our history was whitewashed because we lived there for 1,000 years and then we did not know about all the inventions and all the oral histories and so many other things, written history that we had that got wiped away. And now I feel so much alike that, oh my God, my first powwow when I went to, I was like, oh my God, they're just like us. They live with a lot of families and cousins. They have similar dances. They love the nature. How come we're so alike and we did not even know? And that made me feel even more interested to learn about the history of this country, because if we do not know about the history, we will repeat it again. Mm-hmm. If we do not correct what was wrong, we will repeat in our present, which we can see around the world still happening in so many other countries. Now, I want to ask you a question, Auntie Bren. Sure. Because this podcast is not only to let our audience know about the subject topics we're talking about, but also for us to get educated about it so that we get to look up some things on Google for 5 minutes and we can know a lot of things that is not on our textbooks. So as an Indigenous relationship expert, I would say, what would you advise to non-Indigenous people that what are some of the most effective ways of building trust and strengthen our relationship between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people?
I really like that question because that's basically my life work. And what I mean by my life work is I've been in industry for years. Before I went into industry, I was in the legal profession for years. It took a toll on me because I was doing criminal and family law within my own community. So I needed a change. And once I got into industry, it was something that I just loved. And for me, I keep telling everybody, when you're doing these Indigenous relations position, make sure they're Indigenous. I'm going to use a perfect example. I think it was last week, a good friend of mine asked me to help out open this huge conference at the Telecenter. And so I was waiting for them to, reach out to me. They did, but it was very limited. And that should have been my red flag right there. But I wanted to help my friend who was also Indigenous. And when I got there, my name wasn't on anything. I couldn't get in. I couldn't even get a badge. And so I kept texting the lady that I was supposed to meet with. I'm a knowledge keeper. There's certain protocols and certain traditions that you're supposed to do. She didn't do any of them. And then I found out that I was also supposed to be doing a blessing. My understanding was I was going to do which I don't usually do, the land acknowledgement. That should be coming from the non-Indigenous to acknowledge that you're on my land. Exactly. But it was a U.S. company, and I'm like, okay, I'll help this lady out. So when the other lady finally showed up 45 minutes later, I'm sitting outside and I'm upset. And so I was trying to explain to her in the nicest, calmest way, the way you handled this was so disrespectful. And her response to me was, things happen. And
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And so I couldn't put up with that. And so I said, thank you very much. And I left. And she's like, you're leaving? I'm like, yes. And when I got home, I phoned a friend of mine. I was telling them what I did. And she's like, how do you feel? And I said, well, hurt, but now they'll know the next time they do this, they better treat the person better than they treated me. So it's a lesson learned. Yeah. And you spoke earlier about your background being colonized and why, there's not much history on it. Because it was wrong what happened to you, what happened to me, and they don't want to acknowledge that. And that hurts, but at the same time, it makes us stronger. Because where are you now, Lisa? You're at this great college, you're doing these great podcasts. It's giving us that voice. The more they try to silence us,
it makes us stronger.
There you go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That's a beautiful way of answering. Even today, when I was coming to the college this morning, I was with my dad. He's a wonderful person. He brought us here 12 years ago. And he's like, oh, why are you taking this? Because he grows a fresh marigold. He has a beautiful garden. And there was this orange, bright marigold flowers. And I say, Dad, can I take some of these? Because, to respect the survivors and the kids from the residential school. Every year he says yes. And every year he grows those marigold flowers. And I put it at the reception, if you have seen that. And then a very interesting question he asked. He's like, oh, so you're going to talk about the history. He's like, well, do you know about it? I'm like, you know what? I don't know a lot about it, but I think that's okay to say I do not know.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you teach me? Or why don't you just look at the YouTube videos or Google? There is a website. And then he's like, yeah, sometimes when you try to look into things in the history, you don't find a lot of information about it because many of the things are wiped out. And then I told my dad that, did you know when actually the last residential school closed? He's like, I don't know, like 1800s? And I'm like, no, it was in 1996. I was 6 years old. He was driving and he's just looking, he's like, are you serious? I'm like, Dad, it's not from the history. It's like very recent and there is more things happening right now. So you don't have to look like 200 years ago or 300 years ago. There is a lot of evidence right now. So you cannot say, oh, I don't know, or I cannot see. It's just you have to look out for it. Do you mind sharing one or two more resources where people can look up things? Could be a website, could be the calls, the 94 calls. Where should the non-Indigenous people look up towards to know more about the residential school, and what is the most recent update about how we can be part of Truth and Reconciliation?
Well, for me, there's a lot online. And I do send them to, the University of Alberta. I'm more of a hands-on person because yes, you can, Google, yes, you can watch a film, but if you're not in the First Nations communities and seeing what's happening to us, one of the things I just recently did with industry, I was working for engineering company, and it was really hard to get them to understand. And so I kind of maneuvered the way I do my Indigenous relations and strategic partnerships more linear, because that's how they understand it. And even then, it was still kind of hard. So what I did was I took the C-suite, all the executive VPs and our CEO, I took them down to Siksapia'ki. And, you can reach out if you want. Make sure you reach out to an Indigenous person from Siksapia'ki. And what I did was I took them down to our Blackfoot Crossing Historical Park. It's a huge museum. Please go out and check it.
Maybe we can take our staff and students there.
That'd be perfect. It's huge. It's beautiful. And it's right on top of this hill that we have out there, and below us is the Bow River, and it's actually right across from where we signed our treaty back in 149 years ago, this year. And so they did the tour, and then I took them to Old Sun Community College. It's a community college now, but it wasn't before. It was our old son residential school. And I told them, I'm going to step back. There's going to be a lady that's going to give you a tour. And she toured and explained, this is where the children slept. This is where the ministers and the nuns. And she went through the whole school with them. And I did warn them before. I said, there's a certain area that they're not going to take you into, and there's a reason why, and she'll explain it to you. And she did. So when they came back, I noticed they're very somber. And so I was just going to let them, I didn't want to jump in yet. I just wanted them to really feel that they were in a residential school. There's so many people that are denying it right now, but how can you deny it when you're right in the school? And then after that, I wanted them to heal too. So I took them to our white buffaloes. Again, I'll take the students. Love. And anytime that I'm going through anything, or if I know someone, that is having a hard time and is really fragile, I'll take them down to the white buffaloes, and we lay down tobacco, we lay down cloth. And the lady that runs it and her husband, they're so great. So we did that. We laid down tobacco about our program. It was on the way back to Calgary where I was driving them. And again, they were still very somber. And I said to them, so how was your day? And they said, it was good. We enjoyed it. And they all said the same thing. That's the first time I've ever been in a residential school. So I think when you have that hands-on, it hits home more. Yeah. Another source, tonight at the public library I'm going, he's from our reserve, Trevor Soloway. He's doing a film. He's been doing films for quite a bit. He's doing a film about our nation. So if you have a chance, there's so many different events you can go to.
Even in our the Workland Center tomorrow, whole day, there is going to be a lot of events, and it's free for people. So,
Yes.
That would be one of the things. But thank you so much for sharing this. I think it's very important for all non-Indigenous people to take a step to just talk to an Indigenous person. Talking about that, I also noticed that because with my limited knowledge, whenever I reach out to my Indigenous friends, they always tell me about one thing. They're like, now that people are being more aware of what happened to us and our existence and how resilient we are, and there is a lot of organizations, businesses, they want to do the things right. They are reaching out to a lot of people to either do blessings or being part of the land acknowledgement or other things. My friends keep always saying, please make sure the person is really Indigenous, not pretendians.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that so that other people don't make that mistake?
Sure. There's only certain things, as you alluded before, I'm an activist. There's only things that I will speak about. And the reason why I speak about it is lived experience. So I'll never speak about murdered and missing Indigenous women because I don't have the lived experience. I do talk about 60 Scoop, being a child of residential school, the work that I do within industry to knock down, actually kick down the doors for systemic barriers. The other thing I'm now really jumping on board is pretendians. And for me personally, as I said before, I've gone through many interviews with industry for an Indigenous relations position. I always lose out to a non-Indigenous person. Well, I gave you that example, what happened with the event and how they handled it. I think, the reason why I do all this stuff is for the younger that are coming up, so they don't have to deal with this. I'm going to tell a story. And I think this is where my activism kicked in. In grade 4, there was another Indigenous boy in my class. We were both adopted by non-Indigenous families. And we had our grade 4 teacher that really picked on us and was just, it was not good to us. And so we both told our parents, while our dads took us to the school and went and spoke to the teacher, and they're, basically saying, why are you doing this to our children, blah, blah, blah. And the lady was quite upset and was, pushing back too. And I'm 60 years old. I still can hear it in my ear. She basically told us where the other child, myself, is sitting there, they're just Indians. They're not going to amount to anything.
Oh my God.
And so that really gave me my voice, gave me, I don't want to say fight, but in a way, sometimes you do have to, because a lot of people will turn the blind eye, and again, I do it for the upcoming youth.
Yeah, that's really nice to know that, you've started this since so young, like when you were in the grade 4. Well, maybe because your name Siksapia'ki means the dark lady, so that's the darkness of fighting against oppression.
Yes.
And that also reminds me that it's also the non-Indigenous people who has to take an initiative to be part of any sort of conversation that talks about maybe their ancestors, maybe not their ancestors, just them being here, being part of this land, making a family there, making a living there. Like I recently got married 1 month ago.
Congratulations.
And thank you so much. And I never thought I would leave my country and move to a different country, leave my language, my food, my culture, everything there to be someone else. That was my struggle for the first few years. And then I realized, no, I can be myself. I can wear the sari and go to work thanks to my amazing organization. MCG College is very diverse and talks about multiculturalism. We can speak in our language. You saw that behind the scene, I'm talking in different languages. And many people could not do that. And the people were from the country. I could not believe that in the late 1800s to 1996, almost 150,000 kids were taken away from their home and told, we're going to cut your hair, you're not going to speak your language, you're not going to eat your food, you're not going to see your parents until we tell you. And they were abused, raped, mentally, sexually, physically, and some of the kids were killed. And they are now laying in unmarked graves. How can we not talk about that? So many of the people that I noticed when I talked about these things, who have been living in Canada for many years, they say, oh no, we're not the problem. Like it was before, it was a long time ago. And then I said, well, you can be part of the solution. What are you doing to be part of the solution, right? That leads to my next question is, we're talking about Reconciliation Day. Now, truth and reconciliation is a journey, not just a day, right? Yes, we do have September 30th in Canada to remind everyone about that. It does remind us too, but what can we do beyond just today? What would you suggest? What steps can an organization, schools, or even individuals who are watching us, they can take year-round to contribute meaningfully to reconciliation?
Thank you for that question. I have a friend. Her name is Colleen Dodgenhorse. She's from the Great Eagle Casino. With Satina, which is so close to Calgary, they actually do tours. So year-round, you can go out there. We also have Brent Dodgenhorse and Sonia Dodgenhorse. They have a horse therapy program out there too. With Colleen's program, she'll do a tour with, take you through the different teepees, explain the teepees, and also they have a bunch of buffaloes over there. We only have the 2 white ones in Siksapia'ki, but over there they'll take you for to show all the different buffaloes. Also, they'll do a tour of their community and explain a lot of stuff. There's so much resources out there, powwows that are coming up, a bunch of events that are coming up. Like I said, tonight I'm going to the public library. Tomorrow there's so many different events happening throughout Calgary, which is just warms my heart, makes my heart smile because, we're finally being acknowledged after so many years. And, it gives me hope whenever I do have grandchildren. My grandchildren won't have to go through what I went through. My son is, he takes ecotourism, he has a degree in ecotourism. He does hides. He does a lot of programs, land-based programs. Again, more land-based programs that are out there. I know there's one that's happening out in Cochrane this weekend. If you're in Edmonton, huge powwow. I'll be there dancing. So just go on to Google and put into Google Indigenous events for September 2025, and it will give you a list of all the events that you can go to. Again, I love how you and I have such collaboration and intertwined stories. The Genesis, is it a community center here?
Yeah.
But they actually have a great program that they're working with the First Nations. So they do have a lot of powwows. There are round dances. Again, round dances. You can go
5
to.
minutes away.
Yeah.
You should go there.
Yeah. So and I'm so happy that we are working with the Genesis Center. Again, we both share the same story. So what better way for us to find each other? I have the cutest little story. I was in Vancouver and I have this really good friend of mine and he's Punjabi. And then I met a young lady who came up to me and said, "Are you Bren Little Light?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She's like, "I follow you on LinkedIn. I love your stories." And we end up talking. Well, she's Punjabi too. And so when they met, they were so happy to meet each other. And I said, we all kind of have a little bit of Indigenous in us because we're the same way. Anytime I'm going to any conference, I went to one in Banff. It was all high CEOs and presidents of industry. And there was only a couple of Indigenous people there. And we just went to each other. So that's what I meant when I said we all have a little bit of Indigenous in us because we want to be with our own, and being happy to tell stories. So, yeah.
That's great to know. Thank you so much for sharing those details. I was taking lots of notes. I'm sure my team behind the camera is also taking notes on that. Now, one quick question. You always talk about if you have a grandchildren or the next generation, right? My next question is about that. How, for Indigenous youth, representation and identity are so powerful. How do you see education or career development and cultural knowledge working together to empower the next generation?
Well, I'm going to have to talk about your program. I just recently was starting to do some research on it, and this is perfect because you do have some Indigenous students that are coming here. And, one of the biggest downfalls or one of our barriers is a lot of the First Nations are capped. So, only a certain amount. I'm going to use Siksapia'ki as an example. Let's say we have 300 people that can go to, this was before, could go to university or college. Then you have 700 to 800 people on the waiting list. When you have a college like your college, where they're here to help everybody to get their education, especially with health right now. A lot of our First Nations, Siksapia'ki is one of them, we now have our own health centers. So what better way for your college, who's already doing all this stuff like this podcast, acknowledging the Indigenous and Truth and Reconciliation, Call to Action, UNDRIP, OCAP, having all these students that are taking this, both of the BIPOC, now they can go out and work on the reserves. Because, one of the things that we have problems with is we bring people onto our reserve and unfortunately they don't understand, or a lot of times we call it the rented feather. And what I mean by the rented feather is a lot of industry will go to the First Nations at the 11th hour and want to partner up with them to get that major project. And when they do that, that's so disrespectful for us. So with your college doing all this stuff now, we get more allies.
That's true. That's true. And when I was talking to my friend, he is also like he's Cree, and he's telling us that, you know, I hear you that you have this great projects in your mind, your great ideas, but make sure you take time to get to know them, because how are you going to work with them or for them if you do not know their values and their thought process, their behavior, all those kind of things? It's almost like a common sense and normal courtesy, but many of us forget about that when the profit comes before our eyes, then the people. Mm-hmm. My second last question to you now, Auntie Bren, is finally, what does Truth and Reconciliation Day mean to you personally? And what message you would like to leave with our listeners or viewers as they reflect on this day?
What it means to me personally, as I said before, my family, what they went through. I'm traditionally adopted in so many different First Nations, Kwakatus, Songhees. My brother, Chief Aaron Young, is from the Stoney Nation, Chiniki. I've been traditionally adopted out there for 30 plus years. I was, sorry, I don't mean to say was. I lost someone tomorrow who was my traditionally adoptive mother. Her name is Gloria Nahaney. She's from the Squamish Nation. And she was the one that gifted me my very first regalia because I wanted to go back. Remember 60 Scoop?
She died yesterday?
No. She died about 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. But that, that day just kind of tomorrow reminds me of who I lost, but also at the same time, the legacy they've left behind. Gloria has written a book. They do powwows. She does a youth powwow. And I think the daughters are now doing it too out in Squamish. She's so well respected. And so for me, having that strength, I wouldn't be where I am right now if it wasn't for women like Gloria Nahaney, the late Lila Healy, the late Nellie Little Light, who's my grandmother. They are the ones that gave me those teachings. And I'm in that place now where I'm now teaching the young and the non-Indigenous. So,
thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Now that brings me to the last question, and my most favorite question of all podcast episodes. You have done so much meaningful and impactful work. I always ask my guests that this is the question about their legacy. That's why it's called Legacy Podcast. Mm-hmm. What legacy do you want to leave behind?
I think the legacy I really want to leave behind is that I stood up for my First Nations. Even though I didn't grow up in my First Nations will always be there. And that, to me, means so much to me. But I also want to make sure that, again, I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. And so I want to make sure that, Siksapia'ki, Satina, Chiniki, Good Stoney, Bear's Paw, Bigani, South Bigani, we're all part of Treaty 7. Mm-hmm. And that, we're here in Calgary, we're doing so much work, and that I was able to assist with some of that work. I've done so many different things. I do corporate, but I also do nonprofit, and I do the nonprofit because this takes a lot out of me, and it balances me. So, and the other thing is, you need someone like myself who will step up and say, no, you did this wrong. First try to do it the nice way. If they still don't listen, then, go into that,
Be the dark lady.
Be that dark lady and, tell them, look, this was not right, and stand your ground. And so that's the legacy I want to leave, is that I'm a proud Siksapia'ki. I'm proud of Treaty 7. And, anything that I do, I always keep in the back of my mind, is this something that my son will be very proud of?
That is just so beautiful. Thank you so much, Auntie Bren, for being here today. I would love to continue our conversation beyond this podcast, and maybe we will have you again in this podcast.
Sure.
If not, it is podcast, it will be definitely throughout different ways. It could be the tour that you were talking about, let's walk the walk, right? And it's not just talk. So that would be our next step, to actually be in person in a tour where we can get to know and learn about the people of the land, their values, their culture, and there's so much to learn from each other. Definitely, we would love to do that. Aside from that, if anyone wants to reach out to you, is that okay if they reach out to you through your LinkedIn,
Yes,
right?
please.
So it would be under your name, which is Siksapia'ki, known as Bren Little Light. And if they have any more questions, they can also reach out to us and we will get back to you. Thank you so much for your time, Auntie Bren. And I'm going to say goodbye to our audience. So thank you so much for being here today. I understand that some of this conversation can be hard, but you know what? If you're not part of the problem, you can be part of the solution. So if you want to learn more about the Indigenous community, about truth and reconciliation, feel free to reach out to Auntie Bren, not to us. As she said, reach out to the real Indigenous person to know about their culture. Now, I do want to say goodbye to all of you guys, but if you have any question, comments, please feel free to send it to us. Please like and subscribe our podcast channel. And I hope to see you guys very soon with another inspiring guest. Till then, goodbye.
MCG, making communities great.